The first day with Scar was about learning to breathe in the same space. Jiho sat on the floor of the enclosure, while the juvenile prowled the perimeter, occasionally glancing at him with those calculating amber eyes. He didn't try to touch Scar or give commands. He just existed there, calm and non-threatening, letting the beast get used to his presence. "You're wasting time," one of the handlers said through the comm system. "You need to establish dominance early or he'll never respect you." Jiho ignored the advice. Dominance was what the other handlers had tried, and it had only made Scar more aggressive. What the juvenile needed wasn't a master. He needed a partner. By the second day, Scar had stopped pacing when Jiho entered. The beast would watch him from across the enclosure, sometimes moving closer, sometimes keeping his distance. Jiho learned to read the subtle shifts in Scar's posture, the angle of his head, the tension in his shoulders, the flick of his tail. The juvenile was constantly communicating, but in a language most species didn't bother to learn. "You're talking to him," Dr. Kane observed during one of her visits. She stood outside the enclosure, watching through the reinforced glass. "Not with words," Jiho said, not taking his eyes off Scar. "But yeah, we're talking." "How did you learn to do that?" Jiho thought about it. "I had a dog when I was young. A rescue that everyone said was aggressive and untrainable. My parents wanted to give him back, but I spent weeks just sitting with him, watching him, learning what made him scared or happy or angry. Eventually we understood each other." He smiled slightly. "I guess it's the same principle." On the third day, Scar approached Jiho voluntarily for the first time. The juvenile moved slowly, cautiously, until he was close enough that Jiho could have reached out and touched him. Jiho didn't. He just sat there, keeping his hands relaxed in his lap, and let Scar investigate. The beast sniffed him thoroughly, taking in his scent. Then Scar did something unexpected. He pressed his broad head against Jiho's chest just for a moment, before pulling away and returning to the far side of the enclosure. "He initiated contact," Dr. Kane said, her voice excited. "Jiho, do you understand how significant that is? Scar has never done that with anyone." Jiho understood. It was the same moment he'd had with his childhood dog, the moment when suspicion turned into the beginning of trust. By the fourth day, they were working together. Jiho would walk through the enclosure and Scar would follow, matching his pace. When Jiho stopped, Scar stopped. When Jiho changed direction, Scar adjusted his path. They moved like a unit, not because Jiho was commanding, but because Scar was choosing to cooperate. The other cadets weren't having the same success. Through the observation windows, Jiho could see them struggling with their assigned juveniles. The Velcrin cadets tried to use strength and got into pushing matches. The Mothall tried to predict behavior patterns and got frustrated when the beasts acted unpredictably. Even Hyerin, who was doing better than most, had visible tension between her and her assigned juvenile. Dane, the Ruthan cadet with psychic sensitivity, was having the worst time. His juvenile seemed to actively hate him, snarling and lunging whenever he entered the enclosure. "It knows I'm trying to influence it psychically," Dane admitted during a shared meal. "It can feel the mental pressure and it's reacting badly." "Maybe stop trying to push," Jiho suggested. "Just let it be. That's easy for you to say. Your beast treats you like pack leader." Dane's large eyes studied him. "How do you do it?" Jiho shrugged. "I don't think of Scar as something to control. He's not a tool or a weapon. He's a person, just not a human person." Dane blinked slowly. "No other species thinks that way. To us, animals are resources or threats, never equals." "Maybe that's the problem," Jiho said quietly. The week culminated in a demonstration before the academy staff and observing students. Each cadet would navigate an obstacle course with their juvenile, showcasing the bond they'd built. The course was designed to test trust, coordination, and the ability to work under pressure. Jiho stood at the starting line with Scar beside him. The juvenile was alert but calm, his amber eyes scanning the course ahead. Around them, other cadets were having varying degrees of success keeping their beasts under control. One Velcrin's juvenile had already tried to bolt back to its enclosure. Instructor Velthar gave the signal. The first team started, a Mothall cadet with a relatively docile juvenile. They made it halfway through before the beast balked at a water obstacle, refusing to proceed. The cadet's frustrated clicking filled the arena as he tried to coax the juvenile forward. One by one, teams attempted the course. Some made it through, though slowly and with obvious difficulty. Others failed completely when the juveniles refused to cooperate. The best performance came from a Velcrin who essentially muscled his beast through each obstacle, though the strain showed on both of them. Then it was Jiho's turn. He walked forward with Scar at his side. No leash, no commands, just the two of them moving together. The first obstacle was a balance beam over a shallow pit. Jiho stepped onto it and Scar followed without hesitation, his claws gripping the narrow surface with surprising agility. The second obstacle required climbing over a wall. Jiho scaled it easily enough, but Scar was too large to simply jump. Instead of forcing it, Jiho moved to the side passage, a longer route but one Scar could navigate. The beast followed and they continued together. At the water obstacle where others had struggled, Jiho paused at the edge. Scar hesitated, clearly disliking the water. Jiho knelt beside him and placed his hand gently on Scar's shoulder, the first time he'd actually touched the beast during the demonstration. "I know," Jiho said softly. "But we do this together, right?" Scar looked at him with those intelligent amber eyes. Then, with what seemed like a very human sigh, the juvenile waded into the water. Jiho went with him and they crossed together. The final obstacle was a dark tunnel with flashing lights and loud sounds designed to disorient and frighten. Most teams had stalled here, with the juveniles refusing to enter. Jiho walked into the tunnel without hesitation, trusting that Scar would follow. He did. In the darkness, surrounded by disturbing sounds and disorienting lights, Jiho felt Scar press close to his side. Not out of dominance or submission, but for comfort and orientation. They moved through together, Jiho providing calm presence while Scar provided physical protection, and emerged on the other side in what the observers were quietly calling record time. The arena was silent when they finished. Then Dr. Kane started clapping and others joined in. Not everyone. Commandant Thex notably remained motionless in the observation booth, but enough that Jiho felt the approval. As he led Scar back to the waiting area, Dane approached, his large eyes wider than usual. "I tried to sense what you were doing," the Ruthan said, "but there's nothing there. No psychic influence, no mental manipulation. You're just connected." "That's all it is," Jiho agreed. "Connection. But how?" Jiho thought about his childhood dog again, about all the animals humans had befriended throughout history. "We learned a long time ago that the universe is full of minds different from ours. The trick isn't making them think like us. It's learning to think like them." That evening, after returning Scar to his enclosure, Jiho found Hyerin waiting for him. "You know that just made everything more complicated, right?" she said. "I know. Thex looked ready to put you in front of a firing squad." "I know that too." Hyerin sighed. "For what it's worth, I think what you did was amazing. So does half the academy. The other half thinks you're dangerous." She paused. "The question is, what are they going to do about it?" They found out the next morning. A formal summons arrived, but not to Commandant Thex's office. This one was to the Galactic Council's temporary chambers on Helios 7. The council had convened an emergency hearing. The subject: human influence over empathic species and whether it posed a threat to galactic security. Jiho was being called to testify. And depending on how it went, his testimony might determine not just his future at the Academy, but the future of every human in the galactic military program. "No pressure," Hyerin said as they read the summons together. Jiho managed a weak smile. None at all. But as he lay in his bunk that night, staring at the ceiling while Kix processed data in the darkness, Jiho couldn't help but think about Scar. About the moment when the juvenile had chosen to trust him, chosen to follow him into the tunnel despite his fear. Whatever happened at the hearing, Jiho knew one thing for certain: he hadn't manipulated Scar. He'd befriended him. And if the galaxy couldn't see the difference, then maybe the problem wasn't with humans. Maybe the problem was with everyone else. Commandant Thex's office was nothing like Instructor Velthar's sparse quarters. It was large and decorated with trophies from a dozen worlds, each one carefully positioned to intimidate visitors. The Commandant himself was an imposing Velcrin, his crystalline armor polished to mirror brightness with sharp angles that caught the light like weapons. "Cadet Park," Thex said, his voice cold and precise. "Sit." Jiho sat in the chair across from the massive desk, keeping his posture straight and his hands relaxed in his lap. Thex studied him for a long moment, saying nothing, clearly trying to make him uncomfortable. Jiho simply waited. "You've had an eventful first month," Thex finally said. A Krell beast bows to you. A malfunctioning combat drone powers down at your command. Tell me, Cadet, do these incidents concern you? They confuse me, sir, Jiho answered honestly. But I wouldn't say they concern me. They concern me. Thex leaned forward, his crystalline fingers steepled on the desk. Humans are new to the galactic community. We know very little about your species' full capabilities. When you do things that no one can explain, it raises questions. I don't believe I have any special capabilities, sir. Perhaps not consciously, Thex said. But Earth was isolated for centuries after first contact. Do you know why? Jiho shook his head. Because several species found humanity unsettling. Not dangerous in the traditional sense, just wrong somehow, off. Thex's eyes narrowed. You're being watched, Cadet Park, not just by me, but by interests far above my rank. I suggest you avoid any further unexplainable incidents. I'll do my best. Sir, see that you do. Dismissed. Jiho left the office feeling like he'd just been threatened, though Thex had been careful not to say anything directly actionable. He found Hyarin waiting in the corridor outside, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed. How bad? She asked. He basically told me to stop being interesting, Jiho said. Not sure how I'm supposed to do that. By keeping your head down and being aggressively normal, Hyarin replied. Come on. We need to talk somewhere private. They found an empty observation deck overlooking the station's solar collectors. Through the transparent aluminum, Earth was visible as a small blue dot in the distance. Hyarin stood at the window for a moment before speaking. I've been doing some research, she said, about why humans make other species uncomfortable. It's not in any official documents, but if you dig through historical first contact records, you find patterns. What kind of patterns? Humans form bonds quickly. With each other, with other species, even with animals. We're empathetic in ways that most species aren't. We read body language instinctively. We mirror emotions. We adapt to social groups. Hyarin turned to face him. Most species evolve to understand their own kind. We evolve to understand anything that moves. That doesn't sound threatening. It is if you think about it from their perspective. Imagine meeting a species that can read your emotional state, predict your behavior, and make you like them without you understanding how. That's not a warrior trait. That's a manipulator trait. Jiho felt a chill run through him. You think they believe we're manipulating them? I think Commandant Thex does. And he's probably not alone. Hyarin crossed her arms. The beast incident, the drone thing, they fit a pattern. You're not dominating these creatures or machines. You're communicating with them on some level, making them respond to you. To species that don't have that ability, it looks like mind control. That's crazy, is it? Kix has been researching human history. Did you know we're the only species that domesticated wolves? We took the most dangerous predators on our planet and turned them into companions. We did the same with horses, cats, even birds. No other species has that relationship with predators. Jiho looked out at Earth, thinking about all the dogs he'd known in his life, all the animal companions that humans took for granted. It's not manipulation. It's partnership. Try explaining that to Commandant Thex, Hyarin said quietly. The next week brought a new announcement that made Jiho's stomach sink. Instructor Velthar assembled the cohort in the main training hall with news about their next exercise. You will each be assigned a Krell juvenile for a week-long bonding program, Velthar announced. This exercise tests leadership, courage, and your ability to work with creatures different from yourself. The juveniles are smaller than adults but still dangerous. Several have injured handlers in the past. Kix leaned close to Jiho. This is either really good or really bad for you. It turned out to be both. When assignments were posted, Jiho saw that he'd been paired with a juvenile designated Scar. According to the file, Scar had injured 3 handlers and was considered highly aggressive even for his species. Most cadets would have seen this as a punishment assignment. They're testing you, Hyarin said, reading the assignment over his shoulder. They want to see if what happened with the adult was a fluke. Or they're hoping I'll get hurt and prove I'm not special, Jiho added. That too. The enclosure where the juveniles were kept was located in the station's xenobiology wing. It was heavily reinforced with observation windows that could withstand direct impact from a full-grown Krell. Inside, a dozen juveniles prowled separate pens, each one about the size of a large Earth horse. With the same black scales and amber eyes as their adult counterparts, Scar's pen was in the corner, separated from the others by extra barriers. Through the window, Jiho could see the juvenile pacing restlessly, occasionally scraping his claws against the walls hard enough to leave marks in the reinforced material. "He's aggressive because he's scared," said a voice beside him. Jiho turned to find Dr. Myra Kane, a human xenobiologist who worked at the academy. She was older, probably in her 50s, with gray-streaked hair and eyes that held genuine warmth. "Scared?" Jiho asked. "He looks angry. Fear and anger look similar in predators," Dr. Kane explained. "Scar was taken from his mother too early. He doesn't trust anyone because no one has given him reason to trust. The handlers try to dominate him, which just makes him more defensive." "How do I work with him then?" Dr. Kane smiled. "The same way you worked with the adult, I suspect. Just be yourself, Jiho. Don't try to control him. Try to understand him." The next morning, Jiho entered Scar's enclosure alone. The handlers had wanted to come with him, but he'd refused. If he was going to build any kind of relationship with this creature, it had to start with trust, and trust didn't happen with armed guards standing nearby. Scar noticed him immediately. The juvenile stopped pacing and turned, those amber eyes locking onto Jiho with predatory focus. A low growl rumbled through the enclosure. Jiho stood still just inside the door. He didn't approach, didn't speak, didn't do anything except breathe slowly and wait. Scar's growl grew louder. The juvenile took a step forward, muscles tensing. Every instinct in Jiho's body screamed at him to back away, to show some kind of defensive response. He ignored those instincts and remained still. Scar charged. The juvenile covered the distance in seconds, a blur of black scales and teeth. He stopped inches from Jiho, close enough that Jiho could feel the beast's hot breath on his face. Scar's jaws were open, displaying rows of sharp teeth. One bite could tear Jiho's throat out. Jiho met Scar's eyes and waited. The moment stretched. Scar's growl continued, but something changed in those amber eyes. Confusion, maybe, or curiosity. This human wasn't acting like prey or like a threat. He was just standing there, calm and present. Slowly, very slowly, Scar's growl faded. The juvenile's posture relaxed slightly. And then, just like the adult before him, Scar lowered his head. Jiho released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Hello, Scar," he said quietly. "I think we're going to be friends." Through the observation window, Dr. Kane smiled. In his office across the station, Commandant Thex watched the same footage and frowned deeply. The game, whether Jiho knew it or not, was just beginning. The transport shuttle shuddered as it docked with Helios 7, and Jiho pressed his face against the window to catch his first glimpse of the Galactic Military Academy. The station was massive, a spinning wheel of metal and light hanging in the darkness of space. Somewhere inside that structure, cadets from 43 different species were training to become the galaxy's defenders, and now, Jiho was one of them. He grabbed his bag and followed the other new arrivals through the airlock. The corridor beyond was wide enough to accommodate species of all sizes, from the small insect-like Tylax to the towering Velcrin with their crystalline skin. Jiho stood somewhere in the middle, average height for a human with dark hair and eyes that took in everything around him with quiet curiosity. "First time off Earth?" asked a voice beside him. Another human, a young woman with sharp features and an expression that said she didn't suffer fools. "Yes," Jiho admitted. "I'm Jiho Park." "Higher in song," she replied, adjusting the strap of her bag. "Stick close during orientation. The other species can smell nervousness, and trust me, you don't want to start your academy career looking like prey." Jiho nodded, filing that advice away. He'd been nervous about being one of only 5 humans in his cohort, but Hieron's presence was somehow reassuring. At least he wasn't completely alone. The orientation hall was enormous, with seats arranged in curved rows that could accommodate every body type imaginable. Jiho found himself sitting between Hieron and a mothall named Kix, whose multiple eyes blinked independently as he studied a datapad. The mothall were known for processing information at incredible speeds, and Kix seemed to be reading 3 documents simultaneously. Instructor Velthar stood at the center of the hall, a battle-scarred Velcrin whose crystalline armor bore the marks of countless fights. His voice echoed through the space without need for amplification. "You are here because your worlds believe you have potential," Velthar began. "But potential means nothing without discipline, courage, and the ability to work with species different from your own. Some of you have natural advantages. The Velcrin are strong. The mothall are intelligent. The Ruthan have psychic abilities. His gaze swept across the assembled cadets. But advantages can become weaknesses if you rely on them too heavily. The first week was a blur of activity. Jiho learned to navigate the station's rotating sections, studied xenobiology basics, and trained in the zero-gravity combat rings. He wasn't the strongest or the fastest, but he noticed something interesting. He outlasted almost everyone in endurance tests. While other species grew tired or frustrated, Jiho just kept going. Humans are weird, Kix observed one evening in their shared quarters. The moth owl was hanging upside down from the ceiling, which apparently helped his species think. Your physical abilities are average at best, but your psychological resilience is off the charts. The other species have been talking about it. Talking about us? Jiho asked, looking up from his studies. About how persistent you are, how you don't give up. Some find it admirable. Others find it... Kix's eyes blinked in sequence. Unsettling. Jiho wasn't sure how to respond to that, so he returned to his studies. He was reading about Krell beasts, massive predators from a death world called Krell 9. The Academy kept several for training purposes, though the documents were vague about what that training actually involved. He found out on the 8th day. The entire cohort was assembled in the combat training hall, a vast space with reinforced walls and an observation gallery above. Instructor Velthar stood beside a massive transport cage, his expression grave. Today you will face your first real test of courage, he announced. Inside this cage is a Krell beast, one of the most dangerous predators in known space. It has been partially sedated and will remain chained. But make no mistake, this creature could kill any of you in seconds if it wished. The cage doors opened with a hydraulic hiss, and the beast emerged. Jiho had seen pictures, but nothing prepared him for the reality. The creature was 12 feet tall at the shoulder, covered in overlapping black scales that gleamed like oil. Its head was broad and flat, with rows of teeth visible even when its mouth was closed. But what struck Jiho most were its eyes, amber and intelligent, tracking every movement in the room. Each of you will approach the beast, Velthar continued. You will stand before it for 30 seconds. The beast is an empathic predator. It senses fear, aggression, and dominance. How it responds to you will tell us much about your character. The first cadet, a Velcrin, stepped forward with visible confidence. The beast's eyes locked onto him immediately. A low growl rumbled through the hall, and the Velcrin's crystalline skin flickered with nervous energy. When the 30 seconds ended, he stepped back quickly. One by one, cadets approached. The beast growled at most of them, snapped at a few, and even lunged against its chains when a particularly aggressive Ruthan tried to stare it down. The pattern was clear. The beast responded to perceived challenges with hostility. Then it was Jiho's turn. He walked forward slowly, not because he was afraid, though he was, but because rushing seemed foolish. The beast watched him approach, its amber eyes tracking his every step. Jiho stopped at the designated mark 3 meters from the creature and met its gaze. The beast stared at him. Jiho stared back, not aggressively, just steadily. He was breathing slowly, keeping his body relaxed. He thought about nothing in particular, just stood there present and calm. The growl started deep in the beast's chest. But then something changed. The growl faded. The beast's posture shifted, muscles relaxing. And then, slowly, impossibly, the massive creature lowered its head. It was a gesture of submission. The hall fell completely silent. Jiho stood frozen, unsure what to do. Even Instructor Velthar seemed stunned, his crystalline features reflecting shock. Cadet Park, Velthar said quietly. You may step back. Jiho walked backward, not turning away from the beast until he was safely in line with the other cadets. Whispers erupted immediately, multiple species murmuring in their native languages. What did you do? Hiron whispered urgently. Nothing, Jiho replied honestly. I just stood there. But even as he said it, he saw the looks from the other cadets. Some seemed impressed. Others seemed disturbed. And a few, particularly the Velcrin cadets clustered near the front, looked angry. Instructor Velthar dismissed them shortly after, but Jiho felt eyes on him as he left the hall. The test was over, but something told him that the real challenge was just beginning. That night, lying in his bunk while Kix processed data on his datapad, Jiho replayed the moment in his mind. He hadn't done anything special. He hadn't tried to dominate the beast or show off. He'd just been himself, so why had the creature bowed its head? The question followed him into sleep, and he dreamed of Earth, of ancient forests where his ancestors had walked among wolves and learned that sometimes the greatest strength was knowing how to be still. The whispers started before breakfast. Jiho walked into the cafeteria and felt the shift immediately. Conversations paused. Heads turned. Species he'd never spoken to suddenly found him fascinating, while others deliberately avoided looking his way. "Ignore them," Yeren said, sliding her tray next to his. She'd chosen the human-compatible protein paste, which supposedly tasted like chicken but really didn't. They'll get bored eventually, but they didn't. Over the next 3 days, Jiho became the center of speculation. In the hallways, cadets from different species would stop talking when he passed. In training sessions, partners watched him carefully, as if expecting him to do something extraordinary. Even Instructor Velthar seemed to study him differently during combat drills. Kix was the worst. The Mothall had become obsessed with finding an explanation. "I've been researching human history," Kix announced one evening, his multiple eyes fixed on 3 different screens. "Did you know humans are the only known species that domesticated other predators? Wolves became dogs. You even tamed great cats in some regions." "That was thousands of years ago," Jiho said, trying to focus on his xenobiology homework. "I've never even had a pet." "But it's in your evolutionary history," Kix insisted. "You're persistence hunters, pack animals. Your species learned to understand and work with creatures that could kill you. No other species in the galaxy has that trait." Jiho set down his datapad. "Kix, I appreciate the research, but I didn't do anything special with that beast. I just stood there." "Exactly." Kix's eyes blinked rapidly, which Jiho had learned meant excitement. "You stood there. You didn't show fear or aggression. You projected calm dominance without threatening behavior. To an empathic predator, you probably registered as something it recognized. An alpha, a pack leader." "I'm not an alpha anything," Jiho muttered. "I'm just a cadet trying to get through training without embarrassing my entire planet." But that was becoming increasingly difficult. The incident with the beast had attracted attention from higher up. On the 4th day, Jiho was summoned to Instructor Velthar's office. The Velcrin's office was sparse, decorated only with weapons from various campaigns and a holographic display of Helios 7's orbital trajectory. Velthar stood with his back to the door, crystalline hands clasped behind him. "Cadet Park," he said without turning. "Do you know how many times in Academy history a Krell beast has shown submission to a cadet?" "No, sir. Once, 27 years ago. To a Ruthan cadet with significant psychic abilities. She could project calm directly into the beast's mind." Velthar finally turned, his faceted features reflecting the light. "You have no psychic abilities, correct?" "None that I know of, sir." "Then explain what happened." Jiho hesitated. "I can't, sir. I stood there and waited. That's all." Velthar studied him for a long moment. "Krell beasts are empathic predators. They sense fear, aggression, dominance, submission. They respond to what they perceive as threats or prey. When you stood before it, what were you thinking?" "Nothing specific," Jiho admitted. "I was calm. I just was." "You just were," Velthar repeated slowly. "Most species cannot achieve that state when facing death. Their biology won't allow it. Fight or flight takes over." He leaned forward. "What are you, Cadet Park?" "I'm human, sir." "Yes, you are." Velthar's tone made it sound like both an observation and a question. "Dismissed." Jiho left the office more confused than when he'd entered. He was starting to understand that his moment with the beast meant something to the other species, something that made them uncomfortable or curious or both. But he didn't know why, and nobody seemed willing to explain it clearly. Training continued. In combat simulations, Jiho performed adequately but not exceptionally. In zero-gravity tactics, he was middle of the pack. In xenobiology, he excelled at the sections about animal behavior, but struggled with biochemistry. He was, by all measures, an average cadet, except for endurance. That's where he shined. During a 50-kilometer march through the station's gravity-enhanced training sections, half the cohort dropped out. The Velcrin cadets, despite their strength, struggled with the monotony. The Mothall found the physical repetition draining, but Jiho just kept walking, one foot in front of the other, breathing steadily, mind clear. Yeren kept pace beside him, though he could see the effort it cost her. We're making them nervous, she said quietly. Who? Everyone. The instructors, the other cadets, probably even the academy administration. She wiped sweat from her forehead. Humans have a reputation out here. We're the persistent ones. The species that doesn't know when to quit. Some species find that admirable. Others find it threatening. I'm not threatening anyone, you don't have to be. You just have to be different, Hiren glanced at him. That beast thing didn't help. Now everyone's watching us, wondering what else we can do that we're not supposed to be able to do. The march ended after 8 hours. Jiho finished in the top 10, feeling tired but not exhausted. As he was heading to the showers, a Ruthan cadet approached him. The Ruthan were smaller than humans, with pale skin and large eyes that seemed to see too much. I'm Dane, the Ruthan said. His voice was soft, almost musical. I wanted to apologize for staring during meals. My species has minor psychic sensitivity and you're... Interesting. How so? Dane tilted his head, studying Jiho with those unsettling eyes. Most beings have a psychic presence, a sort of emotional signature. Yours is unusually calm, like deep water. But there's something underneath. Something old. He seemed to catch himself. I know that sounds strange. I'm not explaining it well. It's fine, Jiho said, though he wasn't sure it was. Thanks for introducing yourself. Dane nodded and walked away, leaving Jiho to wonder what exactly something old meant. The week's major exercise was announced the next morning, a survival simulation in the station's biodome. The biodome was a massive section of Helios 7 dedicated to environmental training, capable of simulating everything from Arctic tundra to tropical jungle. Each cohort would spend 3 days there, dealing with environmental challenges and navigating hostile terrain. The jungle simulation was brutal. High humidity, dense vegetation, and artificial wildlife that ranged from irritating to genuinely dangerous. Jiho's squad included Hiren, Kix, Dain, and 2 Velkrin cadets who barely spoke to the others. On the second day, something went wrong. They were crossing a clearing when the combat drones appeared. These were training robots supposed to provide moving targets for practice. But these drones weren't following their programming. They were attacking. Malfunction. One of the Velkrin shouted, diving for cover as energy bolts scorched the ground. The squad scattered. Jiho found himself behind a fallen tree, with Hiren beside him and Kix somewhere to his left. The drones were circling, their weapons tracking movement. Then Jiho saw it. One of the Velkrin cadets injured and exposed, directly in a drone's targeting path. He didn't think. He stood and walked into the open. Jiho, what are you... Hiren started, but he was already moving. The drone swiveled toward him, weapons charging. Jiho stood still, meeting its optical sensors directly. He spoke, his voice calm and clear. Stand down. Malfunction protocol. Return to base. The drone didn't respond. Its weapons hummed with building energy. But Jiho didn't move. He just stood there, utterly still, utterly calm, as if he had all the time in the world. The drone's weapons discharged their charge into the ground. Its lights flickered, and then impossibly, it powered down. Backup arrived moments later, deactivating the remaining malfunctioning drones. But as Jiho helped the injured Velkrin to his feet, he saw the looks again. The same looks from after the beast incident. You did it again, Hiren said that night. Did what? That thing. The calm thing. You faced down a combat drone like it was nothing. It was malfunctioning, Jiho protested. I just tried the shutdown command. We all know the shutdown command. None of us were brave enough or crazy enough to stand in front of an armed drone to say it. She shook her head. The other species are going to lose their minds over this. She was right. The next morning, Jiho received another summons. But this time, it wasn't from Instructor Velthar. It was from the Commandant. The council chamber was designed to intimidate. It was a circular room with seats arranged in ascending tiers, allowing representatives from 43 species to look down upon whoever stood at the center. Jiho entered through the main doors and felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on him. Multifaceted compound eyes, crystalline optical sensors, even the blank stares of species that perceived reality in ways humans couldn't comprehend. Dr. Kane walked beside him, along with Commander Harrison, the ranking human officer on Helios 7. Both had spent the previous day preparing Jiho for questioning, running through possible scenarios and coaching him on how to address the council. Stay calm, Dr. Kane had said. Don't get defensive. Answer honestly, but don't volunteer information they don't ask for. And whatever you do, Commander Harrison added, don't let Thex bait you into saying something that can be taken out of context. Now, standing at the center of the chamber, with the council looming above him, Jiho took a slow breath and tried to remember their advice. Commandant Thex sat in the section reserved for Academy officials, his crystalline features reflecting the chamber's lights like a collection of knives. The council speaker, an elderly Mothal whose name Jiho couldn't pronounce, called the session to order. We gathered to address concerns about human influence over empathic species, the speaker began, his voice amplified through the chamber's acoustic system, specifically the incidents involving Cadet Jiho Park and Krell beasts, both adult and juvenile. Commandant Thex has raised questions about whether this influence represents a security concern for the galactic military. Thex stood. The facts are simple. In the 200-year history of this academy, only 2 cadets have ever induced submission behavior from a Krell beast. One was a powerful psychic. The other is this human. He gestured at Jiho. Yet according to all tests, Cadet Park has no psychic abilities, so how is he doing it? And more importantly, if he can influence beasts that are used as security animals across dozens of worlds, what else might humans be able to influence? Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Jiho saw some representatives nodding, others looking concerned. Cadet Park, the speaker said. You may respond. Jiho stepped forward slightly. With respect, I'm not influencing anything. I'm just being calm. Just being calm, Thex repeated, his tone mocking. And yet 2 separate beasts, creatures engineered to be aggressive and controllable only through strength, bowed to you. That's not coincidence. I don't think it is either, Jiho admitted. But it's not manipulation. It's communication. Explain, the speaker requested. Jiho gathered his thoughts. Krell beasts are empathic predators. They read emotional states. When most species approach them, they project fear or aggression or dominance. The beast responds to those emotions accordingly. When I approached, I wasn't projecting anything. I was just present, calm, not threatening, and not afraid. You're claiming you have no emotions? A Velcrin counselor challenged. No, I'm saying I wasn't broadcasting them, Jiho said. Humans can control our emotional responses when we need to. It's a survival skill we developed on Earth. Dr. Kane stood from her seat in the observation section. If I may address the council? At the speaker's nod, she continued. What Cadet Park is describing is emotional regulation, a trait particularly well developed in humans. Our species evolved as persistence hunters and social creatures. We learned to suppress fear responses, to remain calm under stress, and to read the emotional states of others, including non-human others. We had to because we shared our world with predators we learned to live alongside. Learned to dominate, you mean? Thex interjected. Humans didn't live alongside wolves. They turned wolves into dogs, subservient creatures dependent on human favor. That's not how domestication worked, Dr. Kane replied. It was a mutual relationship. Wolves that could work with humans had better access to food. Humans that could work with wolves had better hunting success. Both species benefited. It was partnership, not domination. Pretty words, Thex said. But the result is the same. Humans have a demonstrated ability to influence other species' behavior in ways that benefit humans. How is that not manipulation? Because manipulation requires deception, Jiho said, finding his voice. I'm not hiding anything from Scar or lying to him. I'm just being honest about my intentions, and he's choosing to trust that honesty. Scar? A counselor asked. You've named the beast? Yes, Jiho admitted. He's an individual. He deserves a name, more murmurs. Some counselors seemed disturbed by this, others thoughtful. The speaker raised a manipulator appendage for silence. Cadet Park, do you understand why some species find human behavior concerning? You form emotional attachments to beings most species view as tools or resources. You name them. You empathize with them. You create bonds that transcend normal species boundaries. I understand it, Jiho said. I just don't understand what's wrong with it. Isn't cooperation across species what the Galactic Council is supposed to represent? Cooperation among sapient species, Thex corrected sharply. Not emotional manipulation of non-sapient creatures for tactical advantage. That's not what I'm doing. Then prove it, Thex said, his crystalline features gleaming. Submit to a test. A combat scenario, you and your beast against a trained military team. If you can't control the creature under stress, it proves your influence is superficial and unstable. If you can, it proves humans have a dangerous ability to weaponize empathic species. Jiho saw the trap immediately. Either outcome would be used against him, against all humans in the military program. But before he could respond, Commander Harrison stood. That test is unfair and you know it, Commandant. Cadet Park has been training for weeks, not years. Putting him in combat against veterans would prove nothing except that experience matters. Then let's make it fair, Thex replied smoothly. My team will use training weapons at practice settings. The scenario will be simple. Capture the flag. No one gets seriously hurt, and we get a clear demonstration of what Cadet Park can actually do with his beast under pressure. He looked directly at Jiho. Unless you're afraid to show the Council your true capabilities? It was manipulation, clear as day. Thex was baiting him, trying to make refusing look like cowardice or worse, like hiding something. Jiho glanced at Dr. Kane, who shook her head slightly. Don't take the bait. But Jiho thought about Scar, about the trust they'd built. He thought about every human serving in the galactic military, every person from Earth trying to prove they belonged among the stars. And he thought about his childhood dog, the one everyone said couldn't be trained, who'd ended up being his best friend for 14 years. I'll do it, Jiho said clearly, but on one condition. Scar participates by choice. If he doesn't want to fight, we don't fight. Agreed, Thex said too quickly. He thought Jiho would fail, would demonstrate that the beast's loyalty was shallow and conditional. The speaker looked troubled. This is highly irregular, but necessary, Thex pressed. The Council needs to understand what humans are capable of before we integrate them further into military operations. Better to test it now in a controlled scenario than discover limits during actual combat. After a brief consultation with other counselors, the speaker nodded reluctantly. Very well. The demonstration will take place in 3 days in the main combat arena. Cadet Park use that time to prepare. Council is adjourned. As the chamber emptied, Dr. Kane caught up with Jiho in the corridor. That was either very brave or very stupid. Probably both, Jiho admitted. Thex is going to throw everything he has at you. Felkrin combat teams don't play gentle even in training scenarios. I know. Jiho looked at her. But what else could I do? If I refused, it would look like I'm hiding something. At least this way I get to show them the truth, which is that Scar and I are partners. Not master and servant, not manipulator and manipulated. Partners. He smiled slightly, and partners look out for each other. Commander Harrison joined them, his expression grim. I've seen Thex's tactical teams train. They're good, Jiho, very good, and they're not going to hold back just because you're a cadet. I'm not asking them to. You should be. This isn't about proving human worth anymore. Thex has turned it into a personal challenge. If you fail, it reflects badly on all of us. But if you win... Harrison trailed off. If I win, it proves we're dangerous, Jiho finished. I know, it's a trap either way. So what's your plan? Jiho thought about it. About Scar pressing close in the dark tunnel. About the moment of trust when the juvenile had followed him into the water despite his fear. I'm going to do what I always do, he said finally. Be honest, be calm, and trust my partner to do his part. He looked at both of them. That's all I've ever done. And it's worked so far. Dr. Kane squeezed his shoulder. Then we'll help you prepare as best we can. 3 days isn't much, but we'll make it count. As they walked toward the training sections, Jiho couldn't shake the feeling that the next 3 days would determine more than just his future at the academy. They would determine whether humans had a place in the galaxy at all, or whether they'd always be seen as something other, something dangerous, something to be feared rather than trusted. He thought about Earth, about wolves becoming dogs, about humans learning to see other species as equals rather than resources. Maybe that